Welcome back to the Volvo Ocean Race. It is day 12 of leg 4, and finally the crews have deliverance. After 4 or 5 days of drifting around, having their brains baked in their skulls and pulling their hair out with frustration as the wind comes and goes, they are finally out into solid northeasterly breeze and heading towards Hong Kong, the final destination of this leg. Let's have a look at the tracker to see what the latest moves have been over the last 24 hours. Zooming in on the fleet, they have gone across the equator. They're back in the northern hemisphere, and you can see that there are 3 distinct packs. We've got Vestas 11th Hour Racing, Dongfeng Race Team, and AkzoNobel leading the charge to the north. In the middle, and we'll talk about that later, the middle pack completely messed up by a cloud, but the current leaders, previous backmarkers, Sun Hun Kai Scallywag, David Witt and his team have taken over the lead with their southerly position. We're unsure as to how this is going to come out, though the weather models are very, very unstable at the moment, and it's going to be intriguing to see who comes out ahead when they come back together in 24, 36 hours time. However, that middle pack is the one that's really interesting at the moment. You may have blinked and missed it, but let's go back and have a closer look at what happened to them. So you can see it was all pretty much tied up at the front, but in the middle there, lots of agitation with sort of clouds coming and going, but check out this moment here. There's one big cloud that came in and just sat on top of this middle pack. And look at what happens when we move forward. Start off with 30 miles of separation on the water, and then Vestas 11th Hour Racing and the pack ahead are doing, well, almost sometimes 5, sometimes 10 times faster than that middle pack. They got completely ruined there, including overall leader Mafre. So it's going to be interesting to see how the points shake out when they get to Hong Kong. Looking ahead, we can see that there's a high pressure zone off the east coast of China that moving slightly out to the east. This is giving a pretty clear, clean gradient all the way across for the rest of the leg. No big surprises. It's going to be all about small positioning in the fleet and, as usual, pure boat speed. However, it's not only the wind that will be keeping the navigators up at night, it is also the reefs of Micronesia. The next 24, 36 hours, these little gems out in the middle of the ocean are going to be a real challenge to navigate around. We've seen some little last-minute squiggles on the tracker previously, and this is the route ahead. Over here, we have the current position of Dongfeng Race Team, and you can see that all the way through here, there are thousands of little dots on Google Earth here. Each one represents a little beautiful coral atoll, but a navigator's nightmare. Thankfully, one of the teams has a lot of local knowledge. Sun Hun Kai Scallywag has sailed through here several times, and I spoke with their skipper, David Witt, to see what life was like on board.
You know, we've done this part of the world a bit, and it was always a bit of a long-term plan. The weather's helped us for sure, but yeah, we know that we know for sure that the grids aren't that accurate in this part of the world, so it's a bit of a balance between, you know, what the grid fob tells you and what you got in front of you.
Clearly, you guys are the home team here between Australia and Hong Kong. All of the other sailors are saying that they've never sailed in these waters before. During your previous passages through here, what have you seen that's helped you go better this time?
Well, I think we've probably seen what we've seen this trip, which has helped us, I suppose. You know, the grid files are never great in this part of the world because they just don't have the historical data like other places. And the doldrums are obviously a little bit different than the other side, and having a team that don't give up is probably pretty special.
I was just doing some routing before I came on the phone with you, and it looks like you're going to reconnect with the fleet and maybe tomorrow. Can you put a wager out there as to whether you're going to be in the front or in the back this time?
You find a bookmaker and you put your month's salary on the scallywag, all right?
All right. There we go. All right, looking forward to it, mate. You've clearly gone through a really challenging period. You were talking about how this is a team that never gives up. So you've got closer than ever as a result of the last couple of days?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's been, the whole Volvo ocean race experience for us has been a massive roller coaster already through other stuff you know about. And this leg has been no different. We got to the top of the sked leaderboard a couple of times and made some errors, and we were 100 miles behind, and now we find ourselves back in. Anything can happen here. It's a pretty volatile sort of situation, but I'm pretty sure that the group of people on the scallywag here can deal with whatever they give us.
So far, having sailed through 0 wind in the doldrums and 50 knots in the Southern Ocean, what's your favourite weather condition so far?
Probably the Southern Ocean, if you could take the cold away. So it looks like that's what the South China Sea will be like. We have done that a lot, and it's pretty treacherous. And if the prediction for the weather's any close, the sea state's going to be quite horrendous in the South China Sea. So we're sort of treating the race to the corner here, basically going to be win or lose. And then basically the only way he can lose is by crashing in the South China Sea. So it's going to be pretty interesting.
We had Roscoe Monson in the studio here talking about navigation in these last couple of days. And I'd just like it if you can tell us a little bit about the tools that you use on board. And when you say there's got to have a bad sea state, what are you using in order to define that?
Experience and grey hair.
All right, so that's not something you can buy off the shop?
Absolutely not, no.
No, bloody good. All right, well, thanks very much, David. We'll leave you back to it.
All right, mate. Bye.
Bye. All right, well, we're going to have to see what I do with my paycheck at the end of this month, but nice to see David Witt looking so positive. The other leaders out on the water at the moment are Vestas 11th Hour Racing, and recently I spoke with trimmer and helmsman Phil Harmer, newly on board for this leg, to see what conditions were like.
Pretty frustrating at the moment. The breeze is really puffy up and down, 8 to 12 knots. Really difficult conditions, really tricky sea state, but we're just doing what we can do, and it's, as you say, it's a lot better at night time than it is during the day. Yeah, it's certainly nice to have some breeze over the deck. It's after 4 days of frustration and snakes and ladders, where everyone's sort of found their spot and is heading towards the Philippines as quick as possible.
Let's talk about the snakes and ladders and how you deal with that mentally.
I don't know if you can deal with it mentally. You just sort of got to deal with the hand that you're dealt. It was a pretty tough situation the last 3 or 4 days. There was a lot of the time there was no wind on the surface at all, so it was rather difficult. Finding clouds was almost tough. There was hardly any. So it was a lot of floating around and just pointing the boat north and hoping that you get a puff.
Sorry for the brevity of that call. We had a couple of connection problems, but remember, we are trying to make live connections out to the boats in the middle of the sea, and so sometimes that has a few challenges. Anyway, the question that I was trying to pose to Phil Harmer was, how do you deal with the mental challenges of Lady Luck sometimes dealing you a bad hand? Here's skipper of Turn the Tide on Plastic, Dee Kafari, talking about those challenges.
I was in a really dark place, and I think every single one of them went to a dark place, but the secret is not to let it show or not to let it impact anybody else. If I came up on deck swearing and miserable and head down, then everybody would go down rapidly. So I went to my bunker for a little while, and I came back, and then you have to look at, well, what can you do? Like, if you're just miserable about it, it doesn't help you sail faster. So, I said, okay, we've got 90 miles to find. That's one bad cloud for them, one good cloud for us, and we've got 2,900 miles to go. There's a lot of sailing left, and anything can happen, and they know that. So it's about still having the fight all the way now. We thought we'd be fighting at the front, and now we're fighting at the back, which is not where we wanted to be. Really disappointed, but we got nearly 3,000 miles left to run. It's snakes and ladders, as we've seen before, and the secret is not to let it get you down, and one person can bring a whole crew down, so it's really important that I have to lead by example. So you come on deck and you go, okay, I'm really disappointed at that, I was in a dark place, but we've got to be positive, let's do the best we can now. And everyone on their own little way has kind of come round to do that, so I don't know whether that's led by example or whether I've just picked those types of people.
Meanwhile, elsewhere in the fleet, there's plenty going on. Check out the snapshot here of the rest of the fleet.
Yes, last night we just passed the equator, and now we're still in the place.
Where are the children of the South?
is that Hong Kong?
No more bad juju. It's done.
It's no wind and lots of raining. We try to getting more going to the north to get more fresh wind.
In the front, keep easy.
Yeah, still so far to going to Hong Kong.
Need 14 knots 313 and we did 15 311. The stance is not good.
Well, there's Frank Gamas saying he's not too worried about Vestas for the moment because, anyway, because he's clearly keeping a very, very close eye on them as they go. And remember, when the boats are not in AIS range, as in they're not within sort of 10 miles of each other, then they are completely in the darkness. They don't know where their nearest competitors are. We're just trying to get, at this moment, a connection from Charlie Enright, skipper of Vestas 11th Hour Racing, not via LiveX, because he's not out at sea at the moment. I'll just check in with my producer to see if we're ready to go. Fantastic. All right, Charlie. So Frank Camas, they're saying that, that on Dongfeng Racing, they're going faster than Vestas at the moment and potentially not too worried about your team. What's your rebuttal?
It's tough to say. I mean, the Northeast has been more forgiving, certainly, for the last couple days. So, they've been able to go bow forward, which is always a dangerous thing. But at the same time, we are between them and Hong Kong. So, lift or header, there's a lot to come.
Now, we just saw a video there with Dee Kafari talking about potential sort of black moments on board as skipper and navigator, that sometimes Lady Luck can give you a bad hand, or as Bauer Becking experienced with his little fleet there with Maffrey and Turn the Tide on Plastic, one cloud out of a leg that's almost 6,000 miles long can put you out the back of the fleet. As a skipper that's been you were a first-time skipper in the Volvo Ocean Race last time round, but you've been skippering boats for more than a decade now. How do you deal with the pressure of the fact that things just don't go your way sometimes?
Well, you have to eliminate your short-term memory, that's for sure. And you got to assume that everybody's kind of going through the same stuff. To some extent, you make your own luck. Because you got to keep grinding it out. You can't just sit there and be a passive participant, let the clouds roll you over. You got to give them your best guess to get on the right side of them. They suck and they blow, and you got to get, you got to position yourself where you think is best to get the boat going through the water. But everyone's going to go through the front side, and everyone's going to go through the back side. You got to try to just keep an even keel as best as possible, knowing that usually it's whoever gets the last one. That's important.
Exactly. At the moment, it's almost like the stock market. You can have virtual highs and lows during the day, but finally, it's only when you bank out that you get that gain or loss.
Yeah, I actually just got back here to the States and checked the Dow Jones Industrial Average. There's been a lot going on here in the States while we've been sailing around the world. And
indeed. So I just asked skipper David Witt what tools that he uses to analyze the forecast, and he gave me a sort of off-the-cuff answer, which he normally does, which is the fact that it comes down to grey hairs and experience. But I think you guys have got more of an analytical response. What tools do you use on board, and particularly in preparation for the league, to make sure that you get on the right side of those clouds when they're sucking and blowing?
Yeah, the grid files the resolution's not great, when you're dealing with clouds. Particularly in that part of the world, they're not extremely accurate. But when the boats are all clumped together, you find yourself using the AIS data more than anything else. If you can look up at the sky and cross-reference that, with what you see on the AIS, that's kind of your best guess as to where the breeze is and where the breeze isn't, and whether your time has come or whether you're still waiting on it. So, it's the real-time data from the other boats, whether it be on AIS or when they get more spread out sked time. So that's a lot better than the grid files, particularly in that part of the world.
And then when it comes down to individual clouds, then obviously you're there using binoculars, checking out to watch the formation of the individual cells, then also the radar to see when it's raining. And can you talk me a little bit through that?
Yeah, you can see the clouds develop on the horizon, and you can basically, check your bearing of the cloud, whether you're gaining on it, it's gaining on you. Is it forward of the beam, after the beam? And, is it raining? Is it not? All these things, factor into how you play it. Sometimes, you have multiple sails up on the bow, ready for anything from 5 to 25 knots. You have to decide whether you got to get the whole crew up. You got to decide whether you can just tough it out with the 4 you got on deck. So there's a lot of decisions. You don't want to overreact, or no one will ever get any sleep. But at the same time, that if you get the cloud right, you can put 20 miles on someone. So it's a very delicate balance.
Yeah, and clearly lots of pressure on your shoulders as well, because as you say, you don't want to burn out your crew. But one thing that I want to ask is, we've had Roscoe Monson here, who's been doing the performance analysis for AkzoNobel these last couple of days, and I wanted to talk to you about the people that sort of operate in your team behind the scenes, and that we see 9 crew on board the boat on a beautiful shiny blue and orange boat. Can you give us a little bit of an insight into the people that we don't see and what they do to make sure the boat goes fast when it's out on the water?
Yeah, just on the navigation and weather side of things, we have a lot of help. We have Anderson Reggio working with us, who's great. He does a lot of nav support, performance analysis, and then we have Chris Bedford from the States, who does primarily meteo stuff. And it's interesting. We do every weather call. We open with like a generic cloud study. It's something that Simon's been focusing on a lot in these last few months, I should say. And sat pick analysis, and he's been working with Chris, and it's good to see that in the doldrums in the last couple days, it seems like we've gotten a lot of the clouds right. We were able to go from bow back in the west to bow forward in the east, and I think that's a testament to reading the clouds and a lot of the hard work that those guys have put in. And also we work with Vestas. They have a very strong meteorology team, as you'd expect, being a wind turbine company. So we use some of their proprietary models for leg starts and finishes. So there's a lot of people in the background that help, particularly Simon and myself, and this leg Mark certainly get ready.
All right, now you're clearly at home. I hope that you're relatively well rested and warm and dry and eaten something other than the freeze-dried. So hopefully your brain is in a different state now than it is when you're out at sea. What are you learning being on the outside looking in? Is it interesting to be watching the whole fleet and getting a sort of peek behind the scenes with the videos and photos and so on coming in from the other boats?
It's interesting. I'd certainly trade, as brutal as it looks in the doldrums and on the equator and what have you. If I could snap my fingers, I'd be back on the boat. But, when you're racing, at least you have like a 6-hour distraction between skeds, For me, it's like I hang on every one and I'm just, waiting for the next one to come out. It's pretty funny when they release the skeds between sked times, and you actually end up knowing a lot more than the guys on the boat do. And that was the case yesterday. They did a position report release, I think, halfway between sked time, and just looking at the distance between the boats, knowing that they weren't on AIS, it was really weird for me to know more than the guys, knew on the boat at the time. I hang on every sked, like I said, and, we still got half of this leg to go. And you think of everything that happened in the first half, it's really hard to, think that this is the way it's going to end. But that's a feeling that you have to have out there, too. You can't get too high and you can't get too low. And, you always got to tell yourself that there's plenty of time between now and the finish, regardless of whether you're out front or in the back. You always got to push as hard as you can. And, being behind the computer and watching this get has just reaffirmed that.
All right, well, fans of the race, there you are. Charlie Enright, skipper of the Volvo Ocean Race, is human and he's just like us. He's clearly glued to the screen just like the rest of us. Now, Charlie, I'm not going to let you off the hook here. I'm going to push you a little bit. Can you point to anything concretely that you've learned from watching the other boats that you can carry forward in the next legs and the rest of the race?
I'm always looking at sail selection and sail trim and outrigger position. I think that's one of the biggest places for gains, and you always try to timestamp the videos and the interviews, and see what sails up in the background, and what wind conditions each boat was in at that time. I noticed some interesting things with the outrigger, particularly on the J1 and the J0, the forward outrigger position early in the legs, from some of the other boats. So that's something that I'm keen to share with the guys. But there's so many variables that make a sailboat go fast. It's hard to hone in on just one. So you try to glean what you can when you can and add it all together.
All right. Well, I think hearing that, the other skippers are going to lose their minds knowing that you're watching that closely. But anyway, it's good for us. Now, Charlie, we've got a competition running at the moment, and we've got some of your swag here in the studio that we're going to be giving away to the viewers. Unfortunately, time is up. You can no longer enter, so you can't enter your own competition. But clearly you've got enough Vestas 11th hour racing gear at the moment. However, I want to hear so that you can play against the people that are playing the game. When do you reckon your team is going to cross the 2,000-mile barrier? And just for those watching, I just checked 1 second ago, and there are 2,667 miles in a straight line between Vestas and the arrival in Hong Kong. What's your best bet? Let's see what you got.
Well, I think I'm on record as 11 o'clock UTC, 11 p.m. I should say UTC, 2300 on the 14th. It might be a little bit later than that, but I actually I had a little heads up that this question was coming. I had to ask Anderson, and that's the information he gave. But if you guys were thinking about it, you'd probably end up guessing somewhere close to me, maybe a little over or a little under.
All right, well, there you go, an opportunity to face off against the skipper in the Volvo Ocean Race. And just one last question that I think I saw pop up on Facebook is, what kind of communication do you have with the boat? We've just been talking about how you've been watching the secrets of the other boat. You're not able to communicate that to them now, are you?
No, they send emails off the boat to me, and through Bill Erklin's our team director, I send some sports scores to those guys, but that's about it. It was interesting to hear, Simon talk about wishing he could sedate a couple people when they were sailing across the doldrums and dealing with all the clouds, and it's up to me to guess maybe who those people are. But it's a lot of one-way communication. But I'll be in Hong Kong when they hit the dock, and I've been just trying to keep notes and not make assumptions because you don't really know the small details out there, but I think it's important that I be there when we get in and we do a download when it's fresh in everybody's mind.
All right, Charlie, thank you very, very much for this really valuable opportunity to get us a sneak behind the curtain and understand a little bit more about your thought process.
No problem. I got to kick this cold.
All right. Lots of Barocca and lemon juice. All the best, because you don't want to take down your team when you see them in Hong Kong. But thank you very much. Moving on, tomorrow is another day, and we're going to be trying to talk to the general manager of the Turn the Tide on Plastic team, as well as all the other highlights and analysis on what is coming up in the rest of this leg. Join us then at 1300 UTC tomorrow. Thanks.